Hello. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today, 5 Steps to Build a Cost-Effective Cloud Protection Strategy. I'd like to run over a few quick housekeeping items before we get started. First of all, I want to stress that there is no dial-in required for this webinar. The audio is streamed automatically through your device. Secondly, today's webinar is being recorded, so a copy will be available for the replay shortly after the webinar ends. Please note there are additional resources for you to download. If you have some time, please kindly have a look at the attachment section to download these. Your feedback is very important to us. You can submit a question at any time by clicking on the Ask a Question button at the top left of your screen. We'll be dedicating approximately 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the presentation to address your questions. Thank you for your attention, and at this point, I'd like you to hand over to our presenter, Mark Goldfin, the Solution Engineer of Dell EMC Data Protection Solution.
Many thanks, Dean, and thanks for everyone for joining this presentation on a sunny, bright morning in the UK. I don't know what it's like where you're listening to this from. Looking at the agenda today, we're hopefully going to get through this in about 30 to 35 minutes and save, as Dean mentioned, save a bit of time after that for questions. Please do throw your questions in during the presentation. Dean will be monitoring these for me and will interrupt me if there's anything particularly relative to what I'm talking about. If not, we'll take them at the end. So looking at the topics really we're going to cover today, just have a look at data protection generally and how data protection sort of is evolving across different use cases and different work streams. Looking at your data protection strategy when it comes to the cloud and trying to pick up on some very key points here about not reinventing the wheel and trying to scale your existing solutions into the cloud. We'll be then looking at two aspects of cloud data protection, in-cloud data protection and extending to cloud data protection. There are a couple of others which we could touch on, but we wouldn't have time today. We'll do that. We'll save that for another webinar. But yeah, extending to the cloud and in the cloud protection is most of the topics really I spend day to day talking to my customers about. We'll focus in primarily on AWS and Azure. Seems to be at the moment that these are leading the way when it comes to the big public type cloud adoptions. That being said, obviously Dell EMC have our own virtual stream offering, which also is relative to this as well. But I'm going to be using AWS and Azure for the main sort of topics in how we protect data in those areas. And I've got a quick technology preview offering for you that you can go and download at the end of the presentation if you so wish. As I mentioned, please throw the questions in during the webinar, and I'll pick them up at the end or during if occurs. So data protection everywhere. What are we saying with this slide? It really is looking at the consumption models you have today, and most of you will have a large amount of on-premise data today, legacy, sort of we call that, and some of that will be physical and some of that will be virtual. Over the last year or two, or maybe 5 years or so, you've been sort of transitioning the way you protect that data from protecting typical physical nodes onto more virtualized environments. And that's perhaps involved a bit of change in how you do data protection. Now, perhaps you're now looking at a bit of converged from Dell EMC or from some others. And again, that may change a little bit of the way you protect your data, but largely converged relies on virtualization. So you shouldn't really need to redesign your environment too much. Undoubtedly, you will be asked to look at cloud-based storage. So cloud object file systems, object storage, whether that be public, private, or a bit of both. Now, that's the consumption models we're seeing, and we're seeing that you're being asked to protect that data across all of those consumption models. You're being asked to apply different recovery time objectives and different recovery point objectives to those different data sets. And while we used to talk about the word backup, Today, really, we talk about data protection for a very good reason, because availability, replication, snapshots, long-term retention, it's all to do with data protection. It's not just backup. And while backups are important on a daily basis, so are snapshots, and so is replication. It doesn't matter where you're protecting that data, you need to protect it. And ideally, you need to protect it in a model that allows you to manage all the different consumption models. The last thing you really want to be doing is deploying a solution that is different for on-prem to cloud, or different from virtualized to converged. You really want to try and standardize your data protection across these consumption models. And finally, how do you actually want it? How are you going to deploy it? Do you build it? Do you buy it? Do you put it in converged? Do you get it as software? Or do you take it as a service? I mean, there are many options today open to you. And really, today, Dell EMC offer a number of these directly or through our partner channel. And things like converged, it's built in. It's Dell EMC's data protection delivered to you on a converged platform. Now, today's webinar will focus purely on the cloud consumption model. We could spend hours talking about all the others, but cloud is the topic for today. So looking at this cloud offering, again, it breaks down into four main areas. When you're trying to protect data in the cloud, is it a private cloud? So what do we mean by that? Have you deployed object storage in your own data center? Is it something like ECS, for instance? Why would you be doing that? Well, maybe you're trying to modernize your environment. You're trying to run third platform applications, which typically run an object file system. So you've deployed a file system that allows you to modernize your environment, transform and automate your existing second platform applications onto third platform apps. So that's a private cloud. Extending to the cloud, we're seeing primarily used in data protection for long-term data protection, LTR. Where have you been using this before? It's tape. So at long last, we've got an option here that allows you to almost match, if not reduce, the cost of storing data for a long time over tape. Something which is quite difficult to achieve, and if you've got hundreds of thousands of tapes that aren't accessed and just sitting in a vault, it may not be achievable. But if you've got a sensible number of tapes, tens of thousands of tapes that you pay for online or perhaps sitting in a library, then extending to the cloud is almost certainly cheaper in the long run. So it's another tier. It's a way of extending to the cloud for another tier of storage that's in your data protection portfolio. Equally so, used for disaster recovery. And we'll talk about a solution that we've recently released that allows you to use that cloud as a disaster recovery option. Next one we're going to talk about today is InCloud Protection. So what does this mean? This is data that isn't in your local data center. This is data which sits in an Amazon or Azure or VirtuStream cloud and is protected in the same cloud. So we don't bring data out of the environment, we protect it within. So InCloud data protection for applications that you may push into the cloud, or applications perhaps that are already sitting in the cloud and you bought as a service. And finally, as a service, again, won't have time to go through this in massive detail today, but solutions such as VirtuStream Storage Cloud from Dell EMC or Mozy from Dell EMC are offerings that we have in a service, delivered to you as a service. And why would you want to use things like this, or perhaps even spanning? If you deploy something like Office 365 or the G Suite, or any SaaS, any Salesforce, for instance, it's strongly encouraged to back up that data just as you would if it was in your local data center. So Office 365 is a very good example. You take that data out of your local data center, push it into an Office 365 environment from Azure. Why stop backing it up? Microsoft will back it up, but they won't have the same cadence and sort of regular backups that you would normally employ locally. So we strongly encourage you to actually deploy those backups as you would normally, but totally in the cloud. So as I mentioned, lots to cover today. What we're trying to show here is sort of a uniformity across all these areas, and going back to the previous slide, across those different consumption models, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. That's the most important thing to take away here. We're not talking about different solutions for different workloads. It's common solutions for all the workloads, doesn't matter where they sit. So Extend to Cloud and InCloud Protection is what we're going to focus in on. I'm going to start here with InCloud Data Protection with two products, hopefully you should all know a little bit about, which is Networker and Avamar. So again, we're not bringing out new products to InCloud Data Protection. We're using the existing products we have today, albeit said they've obviously been updated, and you need to update the latest version. Most of the software we're going to be talking about, whether it's data domain software or Avamar or Networker, will be updated in the next 4 weeks, and it was all announced a few days ago at Dell EMC World. So we're talking about Avamar 7.5, we're talking about Networker 9.2, and we're talking about Data Domain OS 6.1. And that all has general availability in the next 4 weeks. So if you're an existing customer with a maintenance contract, obviously you can upgrade and get all of these features included. So let's have a quick look at InCloud Data Protection, what we've announced there with Networker. Very simply, this is a very simple model, as you'd expect. We've taken something which you could run locally in your own data center, maybe a physical instance of Networker and a physical instance of DD rather, and we've pushed that into the cloud. So you're now able to run Networker, as you have been actually for a year or two, virtually, and you can send that traditional backup to a virtual data domain in the cloud. Now, this has been certified in these releases for both Amazon and Azure. So whether you're running services in Amazon or Azure, you can effectively upgrade to those versions of Network and Avamar and DDoS, and you can push that into an Azure cloud and do traditional backups, just as you would today in your own data center. The same can be said for Avamar. If you're upgrading to Avamar 7.5, you're again able to run your virtual instance of Avamar onto a virtual instance of data domain in an AWS or Azure cloud. So nothing game-changing here, really, apart from if you wanted to just mirror what you're doing in your own local data center in a AWS cloud, you can do that. No process change, you're just pushing it into the cloud. Doesn't really radically change how we do backup, and perhaps doesn't give you any major advantages, just deploying like this. But it's simple, it's convenient, and many customers have been wanting this option just to push what they do today into a cloud offering. Where it gets a bit more exciting is combining the two. So combining an on-prem solution with a cloud solution, or combining a long-term retention into the cloud. And this is where we've changed Networker in 9.2 and Cloud Boost, actually, Cloud Boost version 2.2. We have the ability now to connect together on-premise and cloud solutions with Networker and use it as one combined repository, if you want. So effectively, we can back up locally to the local data center and push long-term retention into the cloud. It gives us massive advantage with management, single environments, optimization, the use of data dedupe, the low compression, and encryption. So it's a very secure, single to manage environment across local and cloud. So let's have a quick look here about something about InCloud Protection on AWS. This is a great solution for Networker. This is the ability to push a Networker client in the cloud to an S3 storage target. So if you're familiar with AWS, AWS has two clouds. It has a compute cloud and a storage cloud. The compute cloud is called EC2, the storage cloud is called S3. You're able to run here EC2 instances, as you see there on the left-hand side, whether it's the applications, databases, files, and they can be protected with Networker, just as you would in your own local data center. But instead of sending that to a data domain, for instance, or a file share, you can send it directly to the object cloud. Now, what does that mean? Well, if it sits all in AWS, there's no ingress or egress charges. You're just simply moving from one AWS cloud to another. But you're optimizing where you're storing that data. So we're sending that data in encrypted format, in deduped at source format. So Cloud Boost client has been put in to the Networker client here for this. So we're deduping, we're encrypting, we're compressing, and we're sending that across to S3. So really, it's backing up using the technology that's been given to you by AWS. There's no other software needed here apart from Networker. We have a Networker server as we would normally for the control, and we have metadata going to Cloud Boost, but all the data goes directly to S3. Now, we can do this for AWS. We can also do it for Azure. So if you're being asked to put services and applications into AWS or Azure and need to back them up, you can extend your Networker environment into that offering, into that cloud, and use S3 as a target. Now, in Azure, they have the blob storage for their object storage. So great solution, new with Networker 9.2, using S3 as a direct target. Some of the benefits here, performance. I mean, we're talking about huge performance benefits if you keep it in cloud. And you can see some of the figures there, 28 terabytes of backup in 12 hours. Client direct straight into S3 storage. Remember, it's deduped at source, encrypted at source, and compressed at source, and it's sent across. So once you've done that first seed into the S3 or the blob storage, you're only sending minimal amount of data. It scales. I mean, you're up there. The solution will scale up to 6 petabytes of logical capacity with a single Cloud Boost instance. So it's not a small offering. Security, everything's encrypted. Clearly, if it leaves your data center, we need to make sure that we're encrypting this data. So while the backups that are going to be sitting in blob or S3 storage, everything will be encrypted before it gets there. You hold the keys. The keys are separate. The keys are held in the compute cloud and not only in the storage cloud. That being said, you can rebuild from the storage cloud if necessary, because periodically the metadata is copied into that storage cloud for protection. So whether it's security, whether it's the self-protection, or whether it's the cost, it's very important how Networker and the S3 target work together. It really does allow you to lower that cost of ownership. Now, that's for AWS and Azure. I'm going to focus a little bit more now on what we've got for Amazon when it comes to InCloud and protecting cloud. Some of these offerings do work for Azure and some of them don't, and I'll point out the ones that don't. There's only a couple today. But there's some great offerings here, and there's a great roadmap going forward about extending to an Amazon cloud or protecting data within an Amazon cloud. Whether you're backing up to the cloud with Cloud Boost, or whether you're using an AWS for long-term retention, again, through Cloud Boost or through Cloud Tier. I'll talk about that in a moment. We've got a solution here for replicating to the cloud. So extending to an AWS cloud with DDBE, the virtual edition. Excellent solution for cloud disaster recovery with data domain again, today unique to AWS. So you can see here the deliverables about when things are available and if they're in beta and if they're in a later release. The beta ones really all go live in the next 4 to 8 weeks. The beta really was talking about software that was announced at Dell EMC World. So most of this here, apart from perhaps the native AWS protection, the last item there will be available in this half of a year, certainly, and that is being pushed into the second half of 2017. So let's focus a few of those areas. Why is it important? Well, if you take out an AWS service, you have to sign a customer agreement. And the customer agreement has a number of items on, as you'd expect. And one of those items talks about security and backup. And Amazon are quite clear that they say that you, the customer, are responsible for backing up your data. While they will try and protect the whole environment, any data loss or if the service is terminated, if you haven't taken a backup, they will not be able to get that data back. So very clear. Yes, they'll give you a platform for you to run applications and store data, but in terms of backup, it's your problem. So why stop? You really have got to, when you move that service, you need to think about moving all of the associated platforms around that service, and data protection clearly is one of them. So Networker and Cloud Boost have really taken a major step with 9.2 to integrate with AWS. Whether it's moving data into AWS or, again, replicating long-term retention into AWS or protecting within AWS only, Networker is now fully certified for both on-premise and in AWS, and obviously in Azure as well. So very important for our existing customers. We're not sort of suggesting here new software. We're not suggesting new platforms, new methods. What we're saying, take your existing software, upgrade it to a newer version, and then really bring in these other environments that you're being asked to look at and asked to protect. How do we interface with data domain? Many of you are data domain customers, I know, and you've perhaps been using data domain to store as much data as possible in that data domain. And we appreciate that data domain is not an inexpensive product, and there are ways to store data more cost effectively than data domain for a longer time. And it gets to a stage where perhaps you say, do you know what, I can't store more than 3 months or 2 years on data domain. I need to put my long-term retention somewhere else. Maybe that's tape, and for most of you it is tape. What we're saying today is there is a true offering here where we can eliminate tape. We can use data domain as the primary tier, but then we can use the object tier, the cloud tier, as a secondary tier. And up till now, that's really involved deploying an object file system locally to that data domain. And a lot of our customers have already started to deploy ECS as that second tier. ECS is a far more cost-effective platform for when it comes to storing data for a long time. Now, AWS is also an object file system. It just doesn't happen to sit in your local data center. It sits up in the cloud. Why not use a service, a cloud service, to store your data for a long time? It can scale as your requirements scale. If you want to reduce the amount of long-term retention you have or get rid of it entirely, you just turn it off and you stop paying for that service. So today, Cloud Tier, DDoS 6.1 will support AWS. Now, some of you may not know about Cloud Tier. How does it work? It takes a data domain, and if you imagined a data domain as a file system of, say, 10 terabytes. That 10 terabyte file system, you can scale by 2x into a object file system. So it doesn't matter what file system you're going to put it into, whether it's AWS or a local one, you can take a 10 terabyte capacity of DD and send that to a 20 terabyte capacity of object. So you've basically increased your capacity of data domain by 3x. Now, that's the maximum you can do. You don't have to have, if your data domain supports 10 terabytes, but you've only got 5 terabytes actually installed, you can still send 20 terabytes to the cloud. So it's really down to how much processing power you have in your data domain. Not all data domains support Cloud Tier, so that the smaller offerings don't support Cloud Tier today. So the DD4500 above support Cloud Tier. But what's the advantage of Cloud Tier? Well, Cloud Tier doesn't involve any backup software. It purely is a data domain controlled process. So what's the benefit of that? The benefit here is we can ingest into data domain with your chosen software, Networker, Net Backup, Backup Exec, and we can then set a policy on that data domain to move it at a certain time or certain age across to a lower cost tier object. Now, when we're moving that data, we don't rehydrate the data. We move it in dedupe form. So data domain identifies the blocks that have reached a certain age, identifies that file effectively at that 1 month or 2 month age period, and pushes across that complete file to an object tier. And what we're saying now with DDoS 6.1, you can push that directly to Amazon. Once you've seeded Amazon with data from data domain, you're only pushing across the change blocks. Any recovery is done through data domain. So you make a request to data domain will fetch that data if it has been pushed to the cloud tier and pull it back through data domain, back through your backup client. So it's totally invisible to backup clients. It works entirely with Networker. It's totally seamless. With other applications, there's another step you need to do to fetch that data back at the moment. But in time, as we develop this software with some of our partners, with people like Veritas, that will be again totally automatic. So you're using an object file tier here, AWS, for long-term retention. You're pushing your data into AWS, and we hope alleviating the need to use tape. So what do you do with your tape today? Well, you probably send your tape off to some kind of tape vault. Iron Mountain seems to be quite popular. A lot of my customers use Iron Mountain. Well, you're using Amazon instead of Iron Mountain. You're effectively saying, I'm going to store it all online in an object file system. And in the event of a recall, it's automatic. I don't need to ring up Amazon and ask them to send me a tape back, just as you would with Iron Mountain. So very, very, very good solution if you're using data domain today. Some of the benefits of cloud tier are it's the speed of recovery. As I mentioned, you're not fetching tapes. You're not waiting for people to deliver the right media back to you. It's instant. It's all online. And you're scaling as your long-term retention scales. So you don't need to buy 100 petabytes or 100 terabytes up front. You simply scale that solution as your long-term retention scales. Because it's all deduped, because it's all encrypted, you'll use minimal amount of storage. So you can take an environment of long-term retention, which may span across 20 or 30,000 tapes, and consolidate that down massively, because all those tapes are storing the same data on different media. With this platform, the data is stored in one platform, one area, one file system, and it's deduped against each other. So the room for consolidation is huge. What about disaster recovery? What about long-term retention in the cloud is great. What about using the cloud as disaster recovery? We know a lot of you have more than one data domain, and for very good reason. You like to get that data perhaps to a different location. You want to secure the data via geography. Well, that second site, if you don't own it, or maybe you only have one office and you have to rent a second disaster recovery site, is a cost. And it's a cost that you hopefully won't use very often. Wouldn't it be good if you could use a cloud offering for your DR? In the event of actually having to bring up service, you bring it up in the cloud. Again, AWS has an offering here where we can replicate data domain to Amazon S3. So we can take a data domain file system and push that using some EMC software to Amazon S3. Now, that repository just sits in S3. And if that's all you do, that's fine. You don't have to do anything else. You know that all your replicas are being pushed onto S3. However, the great bit of software here is that we've now worked with Amazon to open up that replica, present it to a an Amazon virtual host, and it comes out as an EC2 instance. So you can actually restore and run live service in AWS, in EC2, with a out of data domain. So again, what you're buying here, you're buying a local data domain. You're pushing that to Amazon. We're storing that in S3 for you. But in the event of a DR, you're able to spin that up and launch it on EC2 as a service. No software required in AWS from Dell EMC with regard to data domain or networking. Very good solution for disaster recovery. Why? Because it reduces the cost of something which hopefully you don't need to use very often. You don't have to deploy all the kit you have locally in your disaster recovery site. You've deployed a disaster recovery solution here with no extra kit, just some service from AWS. This is available with new versions of Avamar 7.5 and DDoS 6.1. Data protection within AWS. I've touched on how we can protect data using Networker. What about if you want to protect data in AWS without any backup client, without any backup suite software? Well, we have the ability, as you well know, in your own data center to send certain workloads direct to data domain. Workloads like Oracle RMAN or SQL or Exchange or SAP. We call this enterprise applications, DDBEA. So DDBEA is the ability using data domain boost to use Oracle RMAN or use SQL Studio to send data protection backup directly to data domain. Well, we can now also do this in AWS. So we can put a DDBE in AWS. We can run that as a virtual data domain, exactly the same as a normal physical data domain. We have a capacity limit there in AWS today of 16 terabytes, and that's really been architected around the offerings that AWS have on EC2 and the compute they have. You may be aware that DDBE, if you run it on your own local data center, actually scales to 96 terabytes. Running in AWS is a maximum of 16. For information, actually, if you run it in Azure, the maximum capacity is 15 terabytes. Again, designed to really what Azure and AWS have in compute power. So we can take an application, maybe Oracle RMAN, and we can push that directly from RMAN to a DDBE, direct backup using Boost. No other backup software needed here, just simply a DDBE running in that EC2 cloud. We then obviously can connect in to that DDBE, the object cloud if we want to, for long-term retention. So again, just as you would with a normal data domain, you'd have two tiers of storage. You'd have an active tier and you'd have a long-term retention tier. So again, really good solution if you're putting certain workloads up into the cloud and you want to protect them directly. Oracle RMAN is a very popular one. SQL is a very popular one where customers don't now need to deploy backup software. This can be done straight from the application using DD Boost. Replication. Again, replication from data domain to data domain is something quite common. What about replicating from a physical data domain to a virtual data domain in the cloud? Again, there's a limit here of 16 terabytes if you're using AWS per instance, but doesn't stop you spinning up multiple instances. And we have the ability to obviously to encrypt over the wire and encrypt at rest. So the data here is being pushed, it can be totally encrypted. Bandwidth efficient because data domain replication only syncs data. So the actual funnel required, the pipe required into AWS doesn't need to be a big fat pipe. As you know, if you start replicating data domain to data domain, actually the data we send is minimal. So using an existing environment where perhaps you've just got a physical data domain sitting in a third or second site, using AWS as that second site and just renting a service from AWS to put a data domain in there. No process change at all. You're just simply lifting up a physical data domain and migrating that to a virtual data domain running in the cloud. Great solution, again, available with Azure and AWS. Now, I've spoken a lot about DDBE. DDBE has been around for a little while now, actually, a year or two, and it's been slowly been improved. And as I mentioned, the size now is up to 96 terabytes. If you run DDBE locally, you can run it on VMware or Hyper-V, and we're offering you a preview to run DDBE in AWS. So if you have an AWS cloud today, I know you can set up trial clouds. Right? You could just go onto AWS and register a trial cloud if you want to. We're offering you the preview here, running the new version of DDoS 6.1 in AWS free of charge. It won't time out, and you won't be able to upgrade it to a generally available data domain. You have to start again. So you won't be able to put it into production, but you can certainly run a DDBE in an AWS cloud free of charge, up to 0.5 terabytes. You could do all your testing. You can improve various workflows and various software interactions with that DDBE in AWS. It's available in the data domain community, which I'm sure many of you have already registered for. Great community supported environment. So monitored by product management. Very, very easy way if you want to try and get some questions across to our product management team is register on this community, and they'll see those questions, and they often dive in and will answer directly very, very quickly. Not just DDBE available there, we can also get ECS, downloadable software there, and various other offerings where you can run as a software platform from that community. So I encourage you perhaps to go and have a look at that. Go and download DDBE, whether it be for AWS or whether it be for running in your own local data center. There are many options today open to you, whether for cloud protection, whether you want to buy it as a service from Dell EMC, something like Mozy, for instance, or whether you want to deploy something as Network or Avamar into the cloud. We're not really suggesting you change your software. We're saying use the existing software, but span that across all the different instances you have of where your data is stored. So I'm going to stop there, and I can see a few questions have been coming in, and really just remind you, if you want to ask a question, fire it onto the panel now. But Dean, do we have something we can take now?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. So like you mentioned, we're going to take a few minutes to answer any questions now. It's not too late to submit any questions. If you do have any queries, please just submit them in the box top left of your screen. Firstly, Mark, could you explain more about DDBE? Is it the same as physical DD appliance, but virtual?
Yeah, good. That's certainly. So DDBE is DDoS only in software. So when you buy data domain physically, we preload the DDoS onto an appliance, and you buy the appliance. There's benefit in doing that. Clearly, it's a controlled environment. It has the right amount of memory in there. It has the right processing power, and we can accurately tell you how many streams you'll be able to back up a user once, and how replication will work. You can now take DDBE as software and deploy it on your own Hyper-V or VMware environment as an ESX. The big difference, the only really big difference, is the use of fiber channel. So with a virtual edition of data domain, we don't support any fiber channel connected hosts. So with a traditional data domain, you can connect fiber channel and use it as a virtual tape library. You can't do that with DDBE. Other than that, it's exactly the same. Clearly, the performance of the data domain VE will 100% rely on how much memory and how much CPU you allocate to it. But other than that, it's a very, very good way to get a software-only instance of data domain into your environment.
Okay, thank you. Secondly, does Cloud Tier work with all data domains?
Yeah, again, good question. I touched on this briefly. Today, Cloud Tier isn't supported across all data domains. It's supported across the data domain 4500 and above. And the reason for this is due to the metadata storage and the processing power required for Cloud Tier. You'll remember that using Cloud Tier is entirely controlled by data domain. There's no Cloud Boost software involved here. So there has to be a bit of metadata storage when you push data into that cloud. Data domain needs to know it's there, and we need to store that separately to the main metadata, and also move that, encrypt it into the cloud. So there's a bit of CPU, extra CPU required there. Today, the smaller data domains don't have enough horsepower to do both data protection and that cloud tier movement. So we've kept it to an environment which can do that. That being said, if you want a particularly small data domain and cloud tier, DDBE does support cloud tier. So you could start data domain VE with 1 terabyte of active tier, and you could push into the cloud. Again, following the supported rules, you could push 2 terabytes in to the cloud if you only had a 1 terabyte DDBE. But yeah, it's supported across most of the platforms, but just a few smaller physical data domains today it's not supported on.
Okay, and can DDBE provide the same decipher as a physical DD?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no difference at all. The rate of dedupe, the replication, everything is the same. Yeah.
Okay. There's been a couple of inquiries about ECS with S3 support.
Yeah, I can just see those. So ECS is absolutely supports S3. So S3 is a standard. I mean, there really isn't really an object standard, but S3 has become sort of the default standard for object. And Cloud Tier supports, and Cloud Boost support any S3 object file system. So many of our competitors offer object file systems that support S3. And likewise, ECS supports S3. ECS actually really is the sort of the option we're now offering to Dell EMC customers, perhaps for considering other than Centera. Centera has a file system called CAS, and ECS also runs that CAS file system. So you're able to consolidate workloads with ECS. You can take a bit of S3 and a bit of CAS and maybe some direct workloads from some voice recordings or some X-ray, some packs, and consolidate it all onto S3. So very, very scalable, very, very interoperable platform is ECS.
Thanks, Mark. You also mentioned network at 9.2. What are the changes to network at 9.1?
There's been quite a few changes actually from 9.1 to 9.2. A lot of them really involved around the cloud side and Cloud Boost 2.2. So today I've really focused in on just the cloud connection side. So Cloud Boost is offered as a separate appliance. So you can take an existing environment and deploy Cloud Boost as an appliance and use it as a gateway to a cloud. What we're doing with 9.2 is actually including that as a client direct type approach, where the Cloud Boost software is included in the client direct, and you're able to encrypt and dedupe at source and push those changes across, just as you would if you looked at perhaps something like Avamar doing source side dedupe. So obviously data dedupe in the cloud is particularly important. You want to move minimal amount of data when you're using the cloud, and the use of compression and data dedupe allows for that. A lot of our competitors don't do both, and that so you'll need to look at software offerings you have today. There's certainly a very major competitor we have to Networker that offers an S3 interface, but it doesn't offer any data dedupe into that S3 interface, only compression, and that is a distinct disadvantage when it comes to the amount of data you have to move.
Okay, thank you. Finally, if I deploy DDBE in a private cloud today, can I redeploy that license in AWS as our cloud strategy matures?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, entirely. So something which a lot of customers are looking at today is setting up enterprise license agreements with Dell EMC. So an ELA allows you the portability of your software licensing. Most of our products today have software licenses connected to them, even products like Data Domain. So when you purchase a physical data domain, you're able to extract the software out of that data domain and put it into an ELA. And you could also put DDBE, Networker, Cloud Boost, Avamar, all into an ELA, and that's portable. So if you buy, let's for example, 10 terabytes of software ELA for DDoS, you can deploy that 10 terabytes as a single DDBE. You can deploy it locally or remotely, or you can deploy it as 10 1 terabyte DDBEs. You simply purchase 10 terabytes. It's your choice where you put it, and if you want to delete it from one area and move it to another, you can do exactly that. It really helps our customers today deploy things locally, knowing full well that that investment, that cost won't have to be repurchased, or there won't have to be a physical change or a change to the software when they deploy services in the cloud. It was simply lifting that software out of your physical data center and moving that license automatically to the cloud. So yeah, great question. Something which really does help with how you apportion OpEx budgets.
Okay, also you mentioned it's possible to replicate between on-site AWS hosted DDBE. Is that correct?
Replicating between an on-site DDBE or physical DD and a hosted DDBE, correct, yes. So you can do that today.
Okay, that's perfect. I think that's all the questions. Mark, if you have anything to add? Or...
Dean, that's great. Thank you for good number of questions in today. That's wonderful, and it's a good number of attendees. This is being recorded, as Dean mentioned. So if you want to share this with your colleagues, please do. If you want to contact me directly, mark.galpin@dell.com, or contact me on Twitter at markgalpin directly. I spend my whole life talking about data protection, so I'm more than happy to take any questions via email or via Twitter. Thank you for your time today, Dean. Thank you very much for hosting the webinar.
Thank you very much.